Yet we know Cleopatra VII was the first of her line to actually learn the ancient Egyptian language, implying the Ptolemies indeed lacked any moral compass, as their bloody succession dramas often suggest. Did the Ptolemaic ancient Greeks introduce money, the root of all evil, into ancient Egypt? Were the Ptolemaic pharaohs the OG Game of Thrones inspiration? In my humble opinion, it was during this descending age of Pisces when the strategy of absorb and assimilate began to backfire on the ancient Khemitians. If you invite vipers into your sacred spaces, the fatal poisoning will be slow, yet inevitable. This matriarchal pattern of absorb and assimilate the invading threat is a very remarkable and alien strategy, considering the total shiny barbarism that reigns today in the modern colonized world and military-industrial complex of the patriarchy. Therefore, Ancient Khemit, it is important to remember, was not just a political military state. It was an interlocking spiritual system rooted in sacred science, i.e. a science of observation rooted in cosmology principles of harmony, proportion, vibration, and correspondence. We must not underestimate the effectiveness of this spiritual system's yin strategies. Ultimately, it seems as long as the spiritual system remained intact, the current Pharaoh was merely coincidental in the short term. Arguably, this yin strategy of absorption, assimilation, and possible alliance would today not be a very effective strategy to neutralize fanatical colonizers, considering post-Crusades the conquerors seek to impose their own religion onto the conquered, which of course can only be done by eradicating the indigenous religion. Therefore, it is quite astonishing the way the Greek Ptolemies in particular adopted ancient Khemitian iconography and tradition. We could therefore also perhaps perceive this technology transfer as the Afro-Asiatic legacy tradition, which falsely has been attributed to the Greeks and the Romans, whom ultimately extracted and distorted the ancient Egyptian sacred science from its original cultural context for their own vulgar means. However, when talking about vast spans of time, we must always remember that these events take place within a complex web of cyclical change. Martin Bernal argues that it was Afro-Asiatic ancestors in Greece who laid the foundations of the initial influence of ancient culture long before Herodotus.
That hypothesis formation was that this weird ruined structure, and believe me, when you walk through there, you wouldn't see this unless you were prepared for it, an exercise in mathematical harmony and proportion. This started a long saga, 15 years on the site, in which scholars had access to precise measures of the temple, and what he was looking for initially was simply the Egyptian knowledge and employment of the golden section, phi, which has been known to artists, and it's supposedly actually a discovery of Pythagoras, and Schwaller wanted to see if the Egyptians had used it before. So within a very short space of time, a month or so, we realized not only did the Egyptians have the golden section, they also had the diatonic scale and several other musical scales as well. Chinese and the Indians had the same doctrine as well. We'll get into that in the second part of this talk. So here we are, and then Schwaller realized, having Oh yeah, no, sorry, this one. And you see that the skeleton is, or the temple is superimposed upon the skeleton, the human skeleton. It's actually a male skeleton. The proportions of the woman's body are different from the proportions of the man's, altogether different. And so this is the temple of man. This is why Shmuel called it the temple of man. People always say, is there a temple of woman? Maybe. The temple of Isis could be the temple of woman, but nobody has done this kind of harmonic geometric analysis of it. So Shmuel found that it's not supposed to be a model of the human body. I mean, they could have done a huge temple shaped like a human body, but the proportions and the symbolism employed throughout the now, further down in the cosmology, this is processional. The ram of Ammon. Ammon takes over as the chief deity or the chief principle of Egypt. Remember, I can say that as soon as you call the gods, it sounds superstitious. If you think of them as cosmic or organic principles, suddenly it throws the whole discussion into another category. So Ammon becomes around 2000 BC the chief principle or guiding religious principle of Egypt, and his symbol, one of his two symbols, is the ram. He's referred to as the great ram in the sky. Well, that matches almost exactly the ingress into Aries, and the great ram in the sky almost screams out procession to you.
Another derivation of 72 comes from the 6 components of the lunar eye of Horus that form the bifurcating fractions of 1 over 2, 1 over 4, 1 over 8, 1 over 16, 1 over 32, and 1 over 64. These components combine in the various ways to generate 64 fractions of unity, the Book of Changes, or the I Ching, as it existed in ancient Egypt long before it appeared in China. Thoth, or Tahuti, showed Horus how to reassemble the fragmented eye into the wholeness symbolized by the full moon. When we add to that set the 64 fractions of those Ogdoad of primordial deities, we get the number 72. When we add the 4 sons of Horus, or the 4 classical elements, plus the principle of binary contrast of Men and Mut, we get a total of 64 plus 8 plus 4 plus 2, which equals 78. The number...
Put it this way. We've got 4 seasons, and that's what equinox solstice stuff's about too, okay? So you think, cardinal, fixed, mutable. So every season has the initiation of it, the moving through the middle of it, and mutable getting ready for the next season. Okay, so that's the 3. Everything's based on 12. The 4 is earth, air, fire, water. Okay? So there's only one sign that's mutable air, or cardinal earth. And that makes up all the astrological signs. Now, that's one way of looking at it. The other way is that along the ecliptic, which is what the ancients, before there were city lights and everything else, they were just looking at the stars and watching the constellations go by. The constellations of the zodiac are the things that move in the visible spectrum from the perspective of a person standing on Earth.